Hey everyone, welcome to Walking with Disciples. We're in the last 2 days of the book of Acts. So we're Acts chapter 28, kind of the last time we really hear about Paul, from Paul. And so we're in Rome. He's arrived in Rome, and that's kind of where we picked it up yesterday as we look at the story of Paul. And as we've talked about, we learn a lot more about Paul from his letters. There's so many of the New Testament is the letters of Paul to the churches, most of which he actually founded. Now, which is interesting because the largest or the longest letter of Paul is written to the Romans. And what's interesting about that is that Paul is writing to a church that he did not found. He knows people, but within Rome, but he's never been to Rome. And this is actually what we find here in Acts chapter 28, is his first time in Rome. And yet, if you read the book or the letter to the Romans, aptly named Romans, that follows the book of Acts, you find him saying, I long to meet you. I long to be there. I long to talk to you in person. And so it's interesting to me that his longest letter is to a people he's technically never met. And so with that in mind, we read Acts chapter 28, verse 17. It says, after 3 days, he called together the local leaders of the Jews. And when they had gathered together, he said to them, brothers. Now, let me stop there. Right away, get this in your mindset. What is he doing for 3 days? Well, remember, number one, he's been on a long boat trip, right? Remember, he had left, and then the journey, those of you that were with me a couple days ago, we talked about his journey to Malta, I would say the journey to the shipwreck at Malta, what happened there, but it's a long journey. So 3 days to kind of set up his life. He gets there for 3 days. But we also know Paul is always about the Father's business. He's always working. And with the eagerness that we see in the letter to the Romans, the book we call Romans, right? The letter to the Romans, we believe that therefore he's spending time with the Christians that are in Rome. But Paul's heart always goes to the Jews. And so after spending 3 days kind of setting up his household, now Paul is currently not in prison. He's on house arrest, right? So, which affords him the ability to go and do things. So he's in Rome. He calls the Jews. Now, if you remember a while back, we talked, there was a time when the Jews were actually kicked out of Rome for a time. Now, they've actually, since then, have been brought back. It's around AD 60, so the 60th year, Anno Domini, after Christ, right? It's 60 AD, and he says, brothers, though I have done nothing against our people or the customs of our fathers, yet I was delivered as a prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. Now, we've talked about it multiple times. The respect that Paul, Stephen, the others have put out there is amazing. But it's interesting that he immediately talks to them and says, I've done nothing wrong, right? Talk about a little bit of justification right there. You know, I don't know how many of you are parents that are paying attention to this, but when your child comes to you like that, normally like, oh, something's wrong, something's done wrong. Well, think about it. Why would Paul say this? You know, Paul's a very intelligent guy. Well, Paul would say that because they all know that he came over on a ship with a bunch of criminals, right? And that he does have a guard with them. There's someone who's with him and guarding him. So he puts it right away because they're going to look at him in suspicion and go, okay, there's something up with this guy. And he says, hey, I've done nothing wrong, brothers. I am one of you. I've done nothing wrong. According to our customs and according to our people or If we look in the Greek, it's talking about the nation, right? That was kind of their love thing, that they're the nation of Israel. They're a nation without a nation at this point. Remember, they've been captured by the Romans, the Greeks, and now the Romans, right? So they've kind of lost their identity as the nation of Israel, but they would continue to call themselves the people of, the nation of, right? It says, yet I was delivered as a prisoner. When they examined me, verse 18, they wished to set me at liberty because there was no reason for the death penalty in my case. So in other words, hey, brothers, they've counseled, or they've talked to me, they looked at me, they put me on trial, but they figured out I've done nothing wrong. But verse 19, but because the Jews objected, I compelled to appeal to Caesar, though I had no charge to bring against my nation, again, my people, right? Again, with that respect and saying, my nation, I'm part of this. Everything that's been said about me has been said that I'm coming against Moses and the law and the nation itself, but that's not who I am. He's setting himself up. I want you to hear this. He's setting himself up because he knows he's going to be on trial. He's going to be asked a lot of questions. And he wants these Jewish individuals to know that he is not against the nation of Israel, right? That he has a love for them. For this reason, therefore, I have asked to see you and speak with you, since it is because of the hope of Israel that I am wearing this chain, right? So again, he's chained. He's shown as a prisoner. And he says, it's because of the hope that I have. And what is that hope? The hope of Israel is the Messiah, right? It's the second coming king. It's the David's lineage that would come and set at liberty the nation of Israel, that they would once again become the nation, that the king would come, right? That's their hope. And he says, for this hope, my nation, my people, my brothers, this is why I'm in change, right? And their response is something very interesting. And I've done some reading on this because I was really curious, right? Do they really not know, right? It says, they say this to him: we have received no letters from Judea about you, and none of the brothers coming here has reported or spoken any evil about you. But we desire to hear from you what your views are. For with regard to this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. Now, so what are they saying? A couple things. It's very hard for me and for a lot of theologians that I've read to believe that they heard nothing about Paul. Because if you know anything about Paul at this point, everywhere he goes, somebody in the Jewish sect raised a ruckus. Okay, so more than likely, these Romans actually do know something about Paul. Now, to what extent do they know about Paul? Do they know of the exact case against him that's happened? We don't know because of the timing. Remember, for the storms, and we're talking about a great distance. If you saw the map I shared with you, a great distance, and so maybe they don't know a whole bunch about Paul, but more than likely they do know something. But they do allude to the fact that they know the sect, or what's called the way. We've talked about that multiple times, Christianity, right? Know that everywhere it is spoken against, right? Isn't that interesting that everywhere it's spoken against? Now they have the way, the Christians within Rome at this point, and it's all around. It's spread like wildfire in 30 years, roughly. Again, this is about 80, 60. If we do the math, about 80, 30 to 33 is Jesus' death and resurrection. So roughly 30 years, it is gone gangbusters from Jerusalem, right, all the way up into Italy, into Rome, into the known world. It's already moved. So they know about this sect. They know what's going on. But as a good Roman, they're going to listen and they want to understand what's going to happen. So we're going to kind of end there today. But what I want you to understand something with as we end and we get ready for tomorrow, kind of the final words of Paul from the book of Acts and the final part of Acts. What I find very interesting as we draw a close here is the words from Paul to the Romans when he says, I'm eager to meet you. I'm eager to come to you. And how God works that out. Think about it. That is not how anybody would have pictured it, right? If you long to go see someone, in fact, I long to go back and see my family, right? And go back to Oregon and see my family. I don't want to go there as a prisoner, amen, right? I don't want to go there in chains, bound with chains, and being told by the Holy Spirit, hey, this is your end, I want to go there free of my free will, of my ability to move around and do the great things that I want to do. And yet Paul, he longs to go to Rome, even though he knows the end. That's the end of his story, right? That he's going to be there for a time and die there, right? It's very interesting to me. And so I think when we look at God and how he moves, right? God is always moving, and he puts desires in our hearts, and he put a desire in Paul's heart. And then the completion of that desire, right? The completion of that desire is Paul in chains to get him to Rome. So just something to think about as we kind of move forward. God works, you've heard it, in mysterious ways. And this is just one of those ways. So tomorrow we're going to pick up with the rest of the dialogue with the Jewish people and kind of an end of the saga, the end of the roller coaster. So I hope you've enjoyed the book of Acts. I hope we can end this well tomorrow as you and I hopefully understand the movement of God from the not only the day of Pentecost, but the ascension of Jesus Christ to the rest and last words of Paul.